Hello, church. It's so good to be with you. I hope that your summer's going well and that you're finding places to stay cool because it's hot as blue blazes out there. I just want to celebrate our church is doing so many great things this summer. We're about a week away from Vacation Bible School, which is going to be incredible. We've had a summer of backyard missions. We've had youth mission work done for some people inside our church. In a lot of churches, the summer is a slow period of time. Not so at your church. We just ramp up and do ministry like crazy during the summer. And just a great shout out to my team and our staff and to everyone who has served this summer to create ripple effects of love for God. So we find ourselves in the first verse of the fourth chapter. I know some of you didn't think we were ever going to get to the fourth chapter, but we're in the first verse. And a little bit like I said a couple of weeks ago, this is a verse that must be taken in context. Again, we're talking about the subject of slavery, and slavery is an evil amongst evils. It is so present in the world today, and it would shock us to know how many people groups are enslaved in the world still today. And I think the word slavery just brings to mind so many horrific acts of the sinfulness that humans can just really oppress other humans and how we can hurt other humans. So let me read this passage to you and I'll circle back to some thoughts. It says, "Masters, provide your slaves with what is right and fair, because you know that you also have a master in heaven." So Paul's doing two things there. First of all, he's calling on slave owners to do something that they would have felt no obligation to do, which is to do the right thing and treat their slaves fairly, right? So that's the first thing. But what comes to our mind is, why doesn't Paul just come out and say, slave owners, set your slaves free, right? Earlier, Paul talks about in other books and earlier in Colossians, there's no difference between slave and free. There's no difference between male and female. Paul's pretty clear about that, but he also understands the context with which slave owners were living in. And so the statement to them is, listen, do the right thing by your slaves. But man, here's where it comes for you. If you're a Christian slave owner in the day, this is how you would have to hear it. He would remind them that he says this, keep in mind that you know that you also have a master in heaven. So think about the slave owner dynamic. The slave who would always have to be responsive to the slave owner. Likewise, what he's saying to the slave owner is one day you will have to be responsible to your heavenly master. Ooh, that's a bigger deal. And so I think Paul's trying to bring equilibrium to a place that culturally has no equilibrium. So one of the things I thought about as I read this passage is I thought about the broken realities of our world and just how torturesome our world is. Think about it. We live in a world where slavery is still a thing, where sex trafficking is still a thing, where prostitution is a thing, where child pornography is a thing, and where child abuse just runs rampant in this country. We live in a world where all of these are cultural realities of which you and I are to bring light and the truth of the gospel to, and to actually stand up and fight. I'm so proud of our church for the many times that we've stood up and declared sex trafficking just one of the great dark evils of the world and have done our part to help support sex trafficking ministries. That we would take a stand in places where children are hurt and abused and are orphaned and whatever that looks like. I'm proud of our church. But part of the problem for us is that we can't alone. We've got to combine together to begin to share the love of Christ, to begin to push these dark things back and make them unacceptable. Part of what Paul knows in the first century is he's not going to talk Rome into making a law that outlaws slavery. As we see even in our own context, how many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years it took before that became outlawed in the modern world. And so likewise, when we think about all these evils in the world that are really broken realities, God created in the Garden of Eden perfection. And from the moment that fruit got eaten, it became a broken reality, which has now rippled forward and exponentially grown. So what Paul is trying to do here is he's trying to hold accountable slaveholders, but reminding also slaves that the way that they engage and they live inside this place is to do so with the heart of Christ, with love. Church, I can't imagine anything more abhorrent than slavery. I wish I could say to you it didn't exist. But I think, like Paul here, that we need to hold accountable those people who continue to think darkness is acceptable, and that we would continue to be light that forces them to the edges of the very world we live in, where there is no longer a place for this kind of sickness and abuse that occurs at the expense of other human beings. It breaks my heart to think about the abhorrent abuses that occur. And we are called to be light, right? And we are to be reminded that we're going to have to give an account to a heavenly master. So church, I love you. This is hard teaching. It's got to be taken within the first century context, but also can be translated into our world and the call of Christ for us to push back darkness. I hope this has been helpful to you, and I look forward to being with you again soon. Have an amazing week, church.